Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 485, which will get ceremonially archived just like the rest of Gallifrey. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad.
Did you guys do anything this week?
We watched the first season of Staged.
What's that?
It's a series that's currently on Hulu. I think it was a BBC show that stars David Tennant and Michael Sheen.
Oh, right. Yeah.
As actors whose play get canceled because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and they're on Zoom.
And so they take their auditions or their rehearsals to Zoom. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I've heard.
It's at times very touching. It's absolutely fantastic. It's really good.
There's a season 2.
I'm really looking. It just hasn't come out in the US yet.
Right.
We're really looking forward to it. It comes out on Hulu. Season 2 does next month sometime. So it's not a long wait. And it's only 6 episodes, so it's a really quick watch because they're only a half hour long.
I should check those out because I've heard a lot of good things about them.
You'll love them. They're absolutely hilarious.
You know,
Michael Sheen and David Tennant's chemistry just continues to be phenomenal.
You know, Stage 2 is actually a meta version of this. It's them talking about it's them in real life, and they are everything that relates into them doing that particular series. And so they've they've taken it out and done this kind of meta thing with it. So very cool. Sean, did you watch anything?
Not really worth mentioning this week. It was kind of a quiet week.
WandaVision was just amazing. Have you seen that one yet, Sean?
That was good, yeah.
Man, that was so good. I think that one's really come the furthest of I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that might still be watching, but that's the one that's come, I think, the most to kind of revealing a lot of stuff, kind of opening up all the mysteries, going, aha.
Well, hopefully, if people who have not watched it, they're not following Disney Plus or Marvel on any of the social media because they posted the song and spoiled it for anybody who might not have seen it.
Right, yeah, I saw that.
The next day.
I saw that.
Or at least by Monday.
That's why we've been making sure we watch it on Friday night. As soon as I get home, me and the kids sit down and we watch the recent episode. I try to stay off of social media all day on Friday. It's one thing if a show drops on a network at a certain time because you know when you're going to be able to avoid stuff. But when it's like Disney where it drops at like 2 o'clock in the morning and everybody's already watched it by noon, and you're like, oh, great. I kind of have to stay away, but it's so good. They're doing such a good job with it. I think they're knocking it out of the park. All right, well.
Did you watch anything else, Glenn?
No, just WandaVision. I don't watch anything anymore. I watch YouTube videos. I watch Doctor Who YouTube videos, Minecraft YouTube videos, mind-numbing stuff that, you know, I don't have to commit any brain cells to. Let's move on to news.
Well, the only bit of news this week is there's going to be a new book zine coming out, which was a phrase I'd never heard of until today, but makes sense. Called Doctor Who Chronicles, and the first one is going to be 1965. This is coming from the makers of Doctor Who magazine. So the book zine, will examine landmark years of the show's history in unprecedented details. The first issue looks at 1965, when the most popular episodes of Doctor Who attracted more than 13 million viewers, and Dalek Mania reached its peak. So it's going to feature newly discovered images, all new features, including a summary of the year's most significant events in the Doctor Who universe, both on-screen and off, a whole bunch of memorabilia, designs for toys that never went for sale, a whole lot of details, just everything you could ever find about that year in Doctor Who history.
That sounds really cool.
I know.
Is there a price point on it?
It goes on sale February 24th for £9.99 from today. Panini stores. Oh, that is today.
Yeah.
And there's a few select branches in the UK, but you can also buy it digitally from pocketmags.com for £8.99 also.
I guess I'm going to have to do that because I have a Pocket Mags account, so that's what I'll do.
This just in, now available.
Yeah.
Now available. I didn't read down to the release date.
Yeah, it's today as we record this, we should say. By the time this goes out, it'll have been yesterday or the day before or the day before or the day before.
This is one of the few times in a
the day
podcast
before.
when we can quite literally say hot off the press.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's probably a good thing that we had some technical issues and couldn't record till tonight because we didn't have any news until now.
It's going to be 116 pages long.
Wow. So I've
That's
heard
pretty good
I've
for
heard
a magazine.
bookzine before, but I've never really thought about it. Is it like because it's like magazine format, but it's like book length? Is that why they call them bookzines?
I think that's the idea.
I know that
Just a magazine.
I think it's Vorp is it's like a fan magazine, or it's not even a magazine. They call it a bookzine, I think, and it's kind of the same concept. It's magazine style, but they do it like one volume a year or one volume every 2 years, something like that. Anyway, cool. Well, I'm excited for that. I'm actually, when we get done here, I'm gonna pop over to Pocket Mags and go ahead and download a copy.
And that's it for news.
All right. Well, do you guys have any fun news that you wanted to share? I mean, it feels kind of empty that we don't have any Doctor Who news. Sean, that's your cue for.
It's still not on.
Well, let's get into our reviews because we might have a lot to talk about this week.
These are some long episodes. A Storm of Angels.
Look at the stars above, below, so many possibilities.
Resistance will be crushed.
No, not for long.
Who's there?
John D.
I hear thy voice, spirit, but know thee not. Thou art bound by my summons. Show no duplicity. Reveal thyself.
We are watching. We wait on you, John D.
Who are you?
What do you desire?
Knowledge.
Then behold the symmetry of the heavens.
Doctor? You're tearing a rift in the time vortex. Pull back! You're dragging us both through! Agent Zero to control. The Doctor's breaking custody. Control! Can you hear me? Zero to control. These are my last coordinates. I'm being granted. 853-889.
Bum, bum,
I
bum.
say, go ahead, Sean.
I enjoyed this one.
I did too. This was,
Me too.
This was so good. Again, I imagined Geoffrey Bayldon doing the first Doctor. I think the mannerisms weren't as forced as they were in the first story that we did that had him portrayed as the Doctor. But I still, in my mind's eye, had the first Doctor in mind, even though there were a lot of times that he was being very un-first Doctorly. But I think that's really cool that you can kind of attribute that to the fact that this is basically a direct sequel of the very first story of the Unbound series. And so, in fact, it picks right up and satisfied my in-universe issue that I had with the ending of that one, where we talked about the split Susan dialogue that was happening. I think that this almost really kind of
It explains it.
Yeah, it just basically puts a little bow on that and says this is why that happened. No idea probably that who wrote this was Marc Platt. Probably no idea that Marc Platt knew he was going to come back and do another one of these, but by signaling that and picking back up off on that, I thought that was really, really clever. But there are a lot of, like I say, there are a lot of things that I don't think he did that were very first Doctor-like, but I think based on the events that happened in the first Unbound story, I think that it's okay that this Doctor, slightly changes or evolves in a different way than the Hartnell Doctor necessarily would have, because of the way his life was cast. He did leave earlier. He didn't remain on Gallifrey for all those years. And I think that this one does a really neat bit of the little, the Hartnell Doctor always said, you can't change history, not one bit of it. And this Doctor is, the idea is, well, you can change, history as long as it's just a tiny bit. And to later come up and realize that there are repercussions for that, and how much the history has changed, and how their meddling has sort of advanced civilization beyond what it should be. And what I really thought was cool is they kind of lead you to believe that early on, it's because they have, and the Doctor's very convincing about this. I think he's almost fooling himself. I think maybe he knows the truth, but is maybe lying to himself and believing his own lie, that they have splintered off into an alternate dimension. Because, as we said, Drake is charting the asteroid belt and, exploring the mysteries of the unknown in space and bringing the riches back to Queen Victoria. And so I sort of thought, I wonder if this is like an alternate timeline. Have we jaunted off? No, it's actually the timeline. It's because he and Susan have been, have been meddling in time. And I thought that what a great idea to kind of show us the repercussions of what can happen. And it's not a new idea. It's kind of a trope that's been done before. But in Doctor Who, we don't get to explore that as often because, or to this extent, because a lot of times, the Doctor fixes things or he doesn't change fixed point in time. And so, there's a lot of finagling in the stories to make sure that things work out right. But that's what I really liked about this. Not to mention, it also really feels, we kind of got away from the Doctor Who story feel. This one feels a lot more like a Doctor story while also, taking us in a different direction. So I think that was one of the things I really liked about it as well.
And it especially feels like a big Finish Doctor Who story because, they do their best to try to match the tone and flavor of what was on television at the time. There's a lot of it there, like especially in the 8th Doctor's era when there isn't anything to match it to. There they kind of just go off and do their own thing. And this kind of has that feel of this grand idea of these 16th century explorers and Gloriana in space and, how that would work. And that's not something that necessarily I think they would have done on television in the 60s for the first Doctor's era.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in audio, it works out so well because you can visualize everything and see how it would work without them having to deal with the special effects of everything.
Yeah. And a lot of that credit goes to Marc Platt. I think he's a fantastic, imaginary writer. I think sometimes he'll write above kind of the scope of the reader, but this time I don't think he does. I think he lands right in there in the average, but has these kind of really clever ideas that he's able to drive home.
I couldn't agree with you guys more. Across the board, this one has these grand ideas and then lives up to them. It manages to feel like, in many ways, a newer Doctor Who episode that happened to be set in the classic era, if that makes sense. As you mentioned, Glenn, there's so many times that the first Doctor in particular is always, we see lots of time meddling in Doctor Who. It's just never the Doctor that's doing it.
Right.
He's always fixing the problem. And so for this to be so cavalier and so, we only did a little bit. We only showed him that one thing. He only hung out in the TARDIS for a week. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but it was Da Vinci. I mean, and to suddenly get to that idea, I would love the opportunity to come back to this universe, not just Unbound, but if we have Drake exploring the asteroid belt, how much further beyond where humanity's at now would they be if they continued on that thread?
Yeah.
I mean, just such a fascinating group of possibilities there. And so that was a really exciting thing. I love the fact that we came back to these characters, from the first Unbound. I love the fact that we fixed what we all kind of perceived as I wasn't really sure what was going on, but this is what I thought. Well, no, here it is. This is what's going on. Oh, okay. And to kind of get more of a resolution on that. I loved the resolution of the story, that how they were able to satisfactorily tie off all the loose ends that were created during this. The only thing I had a problem with was the actual villains. I think the angels themselves were a little. This would have benefited me had this been an episode or a comic, and I would have had some sort of visual reference to go off of, other than their jewel-encrusted, angels. I don't know. Something about that description just didn't quite click well enough for me to be able to visualize the threat.
See, I think
but other than that,
I didn't
necessarily think they were jewel-encrusted angels. I think they were jewels that were alive, essentially, and overtaking people. And then there were this being that was posing as angels
Right.
in the mirror, and they were connected, and they were just not necessarily illusions, but it was the facade that they had over them to make them alluring to these people, and that wasn't their real appearance.
Well, and I think that it was, I agree with Keith. I think it's the allure. I think it was some sort of like maybe sort of a mental thing, a projection that they were projecting, but they described them as at one point, little jewels that are almost like bugs. And I kind of imagined that the jewels kind of, as they took the people over, they sort of kind of killed them, but then they have kind of that sentient hive mind where they kind of work in unison. So they could look like they were, humanoid, or at least humanoid in shape, and kind of these illustrious jewel creatures. And so I think it for me, it kind of worked, and I could kind of imagine what was going on there. The things inside the mirror was a little different because they never really described it as jeweled, but I'm with Keith. I think that's kind of the entity that was drawing those, the gems. So I was okay with that.
And when I imagine the jewels, I would, I imagine, because they talk about like almost like they're skittering. So like, I almost envisioned them as jewels within their placements without like a ring on them, so they still have the metal underneath, so they could have those as legs.
Sure, like the little.
So I thought them.
Yeah.
I thought the descriptions were pretty well done, so I understood kind of what they were talking about.
I love the fact, and I think I maybe sort of suspected, or I sort of thought that maybe Susan was an android early on, or a robot or something, but I sort of suspected something was wrong, that she wasn't necessarily sick, and that this version had been the other piece that came out of the possibility. What was it? The possibility engine? What did they call it? Possibility generator. And so I kind of thought that, but I thought maybe she was going. I didn't really think of her being sort of this abstract version that was created in kind of corporeal form by the possibility generator. I sort of thought maybe she was just like power was running low and she was almost an android state. And so, but I think, that was kind of in the back of my mind. I didn't push that to the forefront yet. So it still was quite a unique surprise when the real Susan shows up, because she has sent, the CIA agent and all these people trying to find the doctor, and she ends up showing up. Well, the first hint is when Ciro shows up and he mistakes this Susan for the president. And I thought they'd go a little further with that. He was very quick to dismiss that she wasn't, that he had mistaken her for somebody else. So it's almost like he wasn't privy to the fact that he was running around with a copy of Susan. And so I kind of wish they had gone with it a little bit further, but it was okay. But when he says that and mistakes her, I thought, okay, I know where they're going with this. The real Susan is really still back on, Gallifrey. She's the president. She went on and led her life as it was. But it still was a neat revelation, even though I had sort of started putting the pieces together, that this Susan, and the reason why she was being sick was because basically the possibility engine was losing power because the TARDIS was losing power, and there was nothing to continue to keep her going.
I just figured she had cancer.
Yeah. I think that's
whatever Time Lord cancer is.
Right. And I think that's what they were trying to imply at first.
They wanted you to think that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think kind of skipping ahead here, but the resolution of this was really cool. Not just how they resolved this, luring the gems away, but the fact that you get the impression that that Susan did go away, but President Susan replaced her, nod and wink as this, not really President Susan, but so she's going to travel with her grandfather anyway, and not have to worry about running Gallifrey as she was. I thought that was kind of a neat way to end it too.
Yeah, I like that.
Extremely satisfying.
Yeah.
And still makes me want more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was kind of.
Now I want that Susan with them.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that Geoffrey Bayldon. I think anybody could probably come in and play that version of the Doctor, but it wouldn't be the same without Geoffrey Bayldon in the role. It's too bad he died.
Yeah, and I think Carole Ann Ford did a great job differentiating her Susans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You could really tell which one was which.
Yeah.
Especially once she showed up.
Yeah.
All mad.
Well, because President Susan, she acts very much more mature and very much authoritative. And young Susan, or the copy Susan, she seems very much like her character in early days, where she's still very kind of naive and excited about adventuring and questioning just about everything that comes up. And yeah, you're right. Carole Ann Ford does a great job of separating both of those roles.
Yeah, and it's not just that it's Carole Ann Ford doing Susan and Carole Ann Ford doing Susan, but there's something about the way that Carole Ann Ford does Susan and Susan that just really, I've always been impressed of all of the Big Finish actors that kind of come back to the roles, that for me, Carole Ann Ford still manages to sound like Susan. I've always been impressed by that, because I've commented before that some actors certainly sound older. And, she being, going from whatever, 16-year-old teenage Susan in the series to now, that's a huge gap to cover. But there's something about her vocal performances that have just kind of always immediately cast me back to that Susan. Now, yeah, she's a little bit older. She's a little bit wiser. She's obviously president of Gallifrey. And yet, it's still Susan. Mm-hmm. And so to get a double dose of that in the same episode was really kind of it was very pleasing. Mm-hmm. I also was quite impressed with the Queen.
Oh, I think I said Victoria earlier. It was Elizabeth, wasn't it?
It was Elizabeth.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the name. I wasn't going to try and step on that.
Gloriana.
We've been down that road before, showing our ignorance on.
Well, I knew it was Elizabeth because they say Elizabeth in here.
But super, super, super jazzed with not only her performance, but the little quiet moments with her and Drake. Mm-hmm. And then again, the resolution with how that's decided.
I want that adventure. I want Sir Francis Drake and Queen Elizabeth off having adventures together now, leading this thing away from Earth, and then, having their own adventures together, because the dynamic between those two was great. I thought the guy that played Francis Drake was, in fact, all the performances in this are terrific. I mean, everybody really in this are really, really well done. But yeah, I'm with you. Drake and Elizabeth's, their chemistry together is just, it's that butting heads, but also working well together. I just loved it.
It would be fun to have, jump in somewhere down the line where they've been at this for a while and she's kind of gotten over her queenness.
Yeah.
And, so we land in the middle of an adventure where she's been forced to disguise herself as a bar wench somewhere. Just the indignity of it when they get back to the ship. I don't know. That'd be fun.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a fun series.
And him, ribbing her about it. That would be great.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe my enjoyment of this is directly tempered by what came before, both canonically within the confines of this story and outside of the story, since the last two that we listened to were kind of stinkers.
Yeah.
Maybe that just the fact that it was a return to the familiar, that it was like, okay, we've done enough experimental. Let's get back to brass tacks, as it were.
Right.
And yet still hit that Unbound remit and still do different things that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very much familiar, but also at the same time very different.
One of my favorite things about the story was going through and discovering all the different things, way things are different because of what they've done in the past. Like even just down to the initial, you think they land on a boat, and then it's the reveal that no, this is a spaceship is just absolutely well done, and such a nice twist that you don't see coming, and it keeps going, and the doctor let the Aztecs know because he was mistaken for the high priestess, and just how they're able to tie into the actual television stories that happen, and then continue on and set up ideas of the changes that were made, because not necessarily they were trying to make changes, they were just being cavalier about it.
Right. And it also gives you that idea that they've been traveling for a while together, that this isn't just their first adventure right off the heels of Odd Mortality, that they have had other adventures in the meantime as well. Some that are familiar to us with the Aztecs, and some that we hadn't seen because this was a different timeline.
Good stuff.
It is really good.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
Masters of War.
Any idea where we might be?
I couldn't get a clear reading.
It does look a little familiar, though.
Look at the buildings. That's battle damage.
Where did you come from?
Well, I'm from Earth.
And I'm not.
What are you doing here?
We're travelers.
Identify yourself and justify your presence, or you will be exterminated!
Will you help us?
Arm everybody you can. Find anywhere that's clear of Daleks and hold it.
We're going to take back the city.
Piece by piece.
Threats to the Order of Skaro will be eliminated.
Let's give them multiple targets on the ground. Crisscross this alley when they turn into it and instruct your people to concentrate their fire on one of them.
This Dalek must be destroyed! I cannot permit this. It cannot be, Davros!
I can't believe they're squabbling and fighting each other like this.
Forward defense outpost destroyed. 23 Daleks dead.
What's that?
Some kind of spaceship. Now, who on earth's that?
Skaro will be turned inside out when we have finished with it.
They are the Quatch. They are in opposition to both Daleks and Thals.
A good start might be to forge an alliance with the Daleks.
That is impossible.
Well, maybe it is, but we're still giving it a whirl. They're coming in fast, Alistair.
I know. The other two sources are going to take them on. We're taking the scenic route to the Dalek City.
We're relying on updates from you to time the train's arrival.
We'll keep you posted as far as we can.
We are not prepared. The civil conflict must cease, or we will be defeated.
Who are you?
I'm the Doctor.
Imagine the loudest bump, bump, bump I've ever given a story, and then magnify it by like 10. That's how much I liked this one.
All right. Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly concur, and not just because this is a fantastic Dalek story. That's a big chunk of it for me, especially since we've come up with a way to tell a different Dalek story while maintaining sort of the same, maintaining the Daleks by maintaining their base character. He's managed to tell a different story with them, and I think that's what I like. But I think the greatest thing about this, and I'm finding that I'm so excited that there are more David Warner Doctor adventures out there, is David Warner. I'm so enjoying him as the Doctor. He does such a good job. He is, to me, he's a personification of not one Doctor but several together. I think he's very much Paul McGann. I think he's very much John Pertwee, and I think he is very much Sylvester McCoy. I think he has elements of all three of those Doctors, and I think that's what makes his Doctor so good. Is it brings in all the best parts of those three characters together, and then he puts his own spin on it as well. I think he's not borrowing or emulating all from those, but he's also putting his own self into it, and it's just, he does such a marvelous job. I can't praise him more, and I'm not as enamored with David Warner as an actor as you guys are. You guys, well, Sean for sure is a huge fan.
I'm a big fan too.
Yeah, okay. So David Warner's just David Warner, right? He's in a lot of films that I like. He's done a lot of parts that I like. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't like the guy, but I've just never, there's David Warner. Yeah, he this is good. He's Stark. I like him. He's, the guy in The Exorcist, or not The Exorcist, The Omen. But in this, he's fantastic, and I'm really enjoying him as a character.
Yes.
All
of that.
I was just saying, you either cut out or you just flat out agree.
Yes, just at the risk of sounding like the David Warner Fan Club Appreciation Society, he in the first audio he was good. He was really, really good.
Yeah.
But he was hamstrung a little bit by the story and the scenario setting up that, well, this is kind of sort of supposed to be the third Doctor. Mm-hmm. And maybe not, but that's just the impression that I got.
I think so.
Yeah. He was pushed into that role. I'm going to be a little grumpy because I'm isolated and I'm on Earth and I'm stuck and I can't leave. And
agreed.
That Doctor, free of that constraint, he suddenly metamorphosed into, wow, this is the Doctor. This is, if you know, they always have those polls. If you could travel with any Doctor, who would you choose? And it's always a agony choice because it's like, this one would be so much fun. This one would probably get me killed. This one would, but you feel like you got to pick. No, hands down, this one. Because he embodies the elements of so many of the other Doctors and did it effortlessly.
Yeah.
He had moments where he was, the wise playing in the lab third Doctor, doing the science stuff. He had moments where he was very, tongue-in-cheek humor and playful, like the Eighth Doctor. He had moments where he was being a little devious and Machiavellian, like the Seventh. I mean, it was just such a complete package.
There was also even moments where he was very pragmatic, like the 12th Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Just, blew my doors off with just how much was in here. And now I'm a little upset to know that casting this good exists. And we've never really tapped it.
Yeah.
That to me is a travesty greater than lost episodes and wilderness years. And
I won't go that far, but
it is such a, why wasn't this guy picked at some point in time to play the Doctor?
Yeah. Well, and I as I said, I think I relish in the comfort that there is more David Warner Doctor out there, and in fact, some of the Bernice Summerfield stories is where we'll get eventually when we get to them. That's where and I think those are just the more recent ones have been he traveling with her. So. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Brig, though. I think the Brig got to really shine in this. He really got to shine in this. This was the Brig in his element. And what I really like about it is that it contrasts so much the first story. It contrasts the Brigadier that is sort of the in Symphony of the Devil. He's jilted by his service because everything that he tried to do because the Doctor wasn't there to his best efforts ended up failing. And unfortunately that just didn't work out for him. And he left disgraced from the service. And so to contrast this where they put him back into his element and he just falls right back into his leadership role in this and being able to command on the front line. And Nicholas Courtney just does. He can embrace the Brigadier so well anyway, but to just fall back into it and really give almost a redemption story arc for this version of the Brigadier, who was disgraced in the service prior, and also to leave him behind at the end for him to become sort of a statesman, so that he can negotiate this between this new dynamic that the Daleks and the Thals will have going forward, I think was a great way to put a bow on the story. Yes, I would have liked to have had more adventures of, David Warner's Doctor and the Brigadier, because I think they work so well together, but I also thought it was very sweet that he got this kind of finale in this story as well.
Well, and knowing Big Finish, had they wanted to continue, they could have slotted more stories between Sympathy for the Devil and this one, because obviously they've been traveling together for a while.
Yeah.
And I think Nicholas Courtney, it almost seemed to relish in performing this different version of the Brig too. There was almost a different sort of energy to him because the character was different just enough. He was still the same character at his core, but the situations that Brig found himself in, while familiar in this situation, but because of the history of Sympathy of the Devil, he performed it so differently that it just made it feel completely different and so fantastic.
Yeah.
Another thing that played into that is the Doctor's reactions to the Brig. We are so used to the Third Doctor, where the Brig will suggest a military solution to the problem, and the Third Doctor will push back against it. And sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it's, absolute loggerheads between the two of them. And this Doctor was like, that's an excellent idea, go for it.
Yeah.
Partially because it's the Daleks, which we never really get that in the Third Doctor run with the Brig, but partially because it felt like they had been together long enough, they'd had enough adventures under their belt, that this Doctor recognized the Brig is in his element. He's doing his thing, and he's organizing the troops, and he's building morale, and just let him go, just let him do his thing, and that to me just endeared both characters to me all the more, because it was so cool to see the Brig blossoming, for lack of a better term, and to finally kind of have a Doctor who was accepting of that.
Yeah, but at the same time, he would still temper the Brigadier at times. One example would be when the Brig was going to give far too much information about himself, and he says Alistair will be fine. And then there was another point where he was going to give more information, and I think the Doctor said something to the extent to, why don't you give him your rank and serial number as well? So he still has those moments of, okay, reel it back, Alistair. But you're right. When he knows that Alistair's playing to his strengths, when he knows that the Brig is playing to his strengths, he lets him go, and he doesn't hold him back in those cases. And I totally agree.
And both of those instances of him reining him in were early on, where the Brig hadn't got his feet underneath him yet.
Right.
Dealing with the Daleks.
Well, and it was more of a defensive instead of an offensive, and I think the Brig's always been better on the offense.
Yeah, that's true too. Well, how many convoys got hit and destroyed? And
right.
Defense sucks.
This is probably, I secretly root for the Daleks anyway, because I like the characters so much, and I don't like them. I like to hate the Daleks. I like to hate them. I like to hate them as an enemy. But this was this refreshing change of being able to, halfway through this story, realize that, wait a minute, these aren't the Daleks we're familiar with. These Daleks actually still have some pity, and they, misguided as it is, are trying to protect the Thals. And that revelation later, to me, it's been a long time since I've listened to or read a story that there was such a revelation that I went, what? And this one was hidden so well. This one was done so well. Nothing telegraphed to me that these weren't the Daleks that we were familiar with. And to have that revelation midway through, I was blown away. To be able to tell a different story with the Daleks, anybody that can do that and not, still use, as I said, the character of the Daleks, but to turn it on its head and think outside the box and do something a little different. Eddie Robson, this is the first time I've seen anybody do this with the Daleks and sell it to me so well.
Well, it helps that we have such a different Davros, too. I mean, he's the same character at his core, but is approached in a completely different manner and taken out of the story for a large part, other than this mythical figure, which is absolutely just fascinating way to establish the character, and even going to the point that, the Doctor doesn't know who he is and hasn't heard of him, and then he shows up out of nowhere. It just all works so well together.
Yeah, putting Davros in this sort of god status, I thought was kind of a clever twist as well.
And something that, in some ways, it seems oddly strange hasn't happened yet. When you think back on the Destiny of the Daleks, where we're search for the Creator because we've come up against the Movellans and can't beat them, and so they're being very pragmatic about it, and the Daleks don't have a lot of imagination.
Right.
But in some ways, you would almost think that that's a ripe opportunity to create this mythical god creator figure and poke some fun at them, and yet still have them, not admitting that they all believe, but that some of them believe. It's really what a great idea. And when that happened, when they started to feed into that, I had the same reaction I did during Doomsday, when the Daleks showed up out of the ball, and we had Daleks and Cybermen in the same story, and my brain kind of went, eek, wait a minute, how many years of fandom, and we've never had this? Nobody's ever thought to put the two of them together before. Whoa! And so I kind of had that same moment of elation. Just ooh, what a cool idea! And then to have him show up, after we've rigged the figurehead, after we've reprogrammed him, and I'm Davros, and what a great we're going to start a civil war. Yes. Oh, I am so on board with the Seventh Doctor of yours, David Warner. Okay, yeah. Oh, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, God shows up. Wow, timing sucks.
Well, and I think the Quatch. I think. I hate the name. Every time they said Quatch, I kept thinking they were saying Quark. But
nothing wrong with that.
The Quatch. Not a very imaginative villain and really annoying. I mean, I didn't think there could be a more grating voice than the Daleks, but then they bring the Quatch along and they prove me wrong. I didn't dislike them.
The thing was the litheness of the voice, and I had to turn up the volume every time they spoke so I could hear them, and then I would have a Dalek screeching in my ear the next second.
Yeah, because they had kind of that wispy euphoric man.
And then Davros went back and forth too. Some of the audio production on this, that was not as up to the standards I'm used to.
I didn't notice, but I didn't listen to it through headphones. It was mostly through stereo speakers, so I didn't.
That was in the car, so I had to turn it up. So I had to.
I'll be darned. I did too, and I didn't seem to have a problem. But the Quartz was a clever idea, and really they served their purpose because they were a vehicle. They were a vehicle in this story to give us an ultimate, the bad guy, the villain that we're not familiar with, and then also give Davros a means for coming back, and also giving us a means for uniting Thals and Daleks together. But I felt that the Quartz was set up to be a little more intimidating than they turn out to be. Does that make sense? It's almost like they were these godlike creatures that were, feared by the Daleks because they were so clever and powerful, and their tactical skills were amazing. And then when they show up, now granted, we did introduce the idea that because the Brig and the Doctor were leading the resistance, they weren't used to those strategies, and so they were on their back footing and always having to adapt to what was happening next. So that worked, and I think that's what sold it. But they were almost built up too much for what we end up getting. I kind of kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it seemed like we never had a point except for the point where the two gals were getting ready to surrender because the Quartz enemy was right on their, doorstep, and they had no other defense other than to give up. And that confrontation between the one Dalek and what was that, Gillen? Was it Gillen or was it Nadell? Whichever one it was. That confrontation about, we need to surrender so we can survive, and hope that the Doctor's plan works, and the Daleks saying that's not, Daleks don't give up, we go for it. Just that dynamic was really good. But to have them show up, and then that was really the only intense what's going to happen moment. From about, I'd say, the 3/4 mark, our heroes had the upper hand most of the way, and I think that was its only failing. Was I wanted that one more what's going to happen next to put us in peril that we're going to have to get out of. And it didn't happen in that last quarter of the story. And not to its detriment, because I was still having so much fun, and the ride was just completely worth it because the performances were great, the story's good, everything that's going on is tremendous. But I sort of just wanted that one more conflict that never came.
They reminded me quite a bit of I don't remember the name of them, but the tinfoil phantoms that invaded Gallifrey.
Yeah, the time...
Invasion of Time.
Invasion of Time, yeah. I don't remember what those were called.
But the very kind of ethereal, wispy, just insubstantial. You can't see them, but you know they're there. And in a way, kind of had the same reveal that, okay, we're building these things up to be these phenomenal bad guys, and then dun dun dun, oh, it's the Suntarans.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
Except I was more excited about the Suntarans, but kind of that same twist where all of a sudden they became something ineffective. Okay.
The Vardens.
Yeah, very, very similar. And I felt bad because Daleks being Daleks and Tuesday being Tuesday, I kept waiting for them to turn around and betray the Alliance.
Yeah.
That was going to be the big twist, is that they're actually going to work with the Quatch and no, just they're here.
Yeah,
we're not happy about it, but we're here and we're doing our bit. And it's like, well, you guys really are different.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Now I did like that they had some of the loyalists to Davros, and so we had this sort of civil war going on. But yeah, no, I would agree. I kept thinking at some point all of the Daleks were going to become loyalists or switch sides because of their ideals or their principles.
The ones that didn't, those were all special weapons Daleks. Headcanon. I should sit out there with a table. Change my mind. But yeah, there's so many layers to this thing that it works on. And so many little revelations that build into big revelations that just kind of keep coming.
Well, the idea that the Quatch were the ultimate reason behind the war between the Thals and the Daleks.
Oh, yeah.
That was a neat revelation. In fact, that's one of the things I thought would have been cool had they revealed that in the main timeline, in the Prime universe. That would have been cool if we found out that there was another group of, aliens out there that had started that war. I thought that would be a clever idea too. And maybe they do, and they just haven't been revealed in the Prime universe.
Yeah, and that conversation when the Doctor and Davros finally meet, and it's like no big deal because I don't know who you are.
Right,
you don't
there's
know who
no
I am,
history. Right.
So you're kind of putting the cart before the horse, waiting for here it comes, and then nothing. There's no fireworks. There's no chemistry. There's no. Where's the? Oh yeah, I have to keep reminding myself that this isn't the thing. All right.
Well, did you not feel like they almost still had this air of they knew each other, or they knew elements of each other? And I don't mean by like some sort of weird eschatological. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Some weird hoodoo thing. Just almost like they could read each other as characters. Does that make sense? It sort of felt like they could do that with each other.
Yeah, I'd buy that. But maybe that's, as fans, us reading that into
that could be too
as well.
Yeah.
But to drop that bombshell on Davros, the people that you're working for, yeah, they're the ones that put you in the chair.
Yeah.
made my earballs happy.
And his voice, that when he performs it, is just so spot on.
I'm sorry, who's that?
The Doctors.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When the way he presents that information is just so.
He could have done it gloating. He could have done it probing. He could have done it forcefully and what about this? But he doesn't. And I think that's what sells Davros on it, is the fact that it's this very quiet, I'm so sorry, kind of thing. And it flips him. And you wouldn't think Davros is Davros, just like Daleks are Daleks. He's not going to flip him. There's something bad going to happen, and it's nope, flipped him. Whoa! I just subverted my expectations at every single turn.
Yeah.
And I think that you go into it and it's like, okay, it's a Dalek story. But it's an alternate universe Dalek story. So, and David Warner Dalek story and a Brig Dalek story. Okay, it's still going to be cool. And, we get just enough of the standard Dalek story to be satisfactory for those reasons. everything else about it is not a standard Dalek story. And it just enriched it so much.
Yeah.
I'm gushing because I sat on it for a couple of days. We had a couple of extra days because of our tech problem. And I was all prepared to go in and go, yeah, I really liked this one. And just the longer I sat on it, the more it was like, no, I really loved this one.
Well, the longer you think about it, the more you see the layers and what all they did
Yeah,
with it.
you get more time to peel it back. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I think also this is the longest of all of the Unbound stories we've done, but did not feel long at all. I think that's what also amazes me about it is a lot of times when we have these really long form 2-hour audio stories, even in the Prime universe, sometimes it'll get mired in a lot of, okay, I would have cut this out, or this could have done without this because it's kind of dragging the story, or I'm getting to the point where I'm ready for this to wrap up. I never felt like this in this story at all. In fact, there was a lot of times that I kept thinking, this is almost over. This can't be over. I'm not ready for this to be done.
I need more. I need more.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
same.
Yeah.
Well, we got more good stuff on the schedule, Sean.
We do, which is posted.
Or of this good stuff?
not like this.
Not like
good
this.
stuff. Other good stuff.
We have so much good stuff. It's unreal how much good stuff we have. That's what I'm going to say about that. The schedule. The next
I thought
chapter,
for a minute there you weren't going to share.
Oh well, yeah. I suppose I could keep it a secret.
No. It's just the way you were tiptoeing around there. I thought, he's not going to tell us.
Well, I was pulling up the schedule.
Oh, that was a delay tactic. Okay, I got you.
But thanks for calling attention to it. The schedule, which is posted, the next chapter of the adventure, as it were. Next week, we will be doing I Am the Master, Legends of the Renegade Time Lord, which is a book of short stories all about our favorite Betty in celebration of his 50th anniversary this year. And then we go back to some Big Finish with the first of the War Doctor sets. We will be doing all 3 stories in that one, The Innocent, The Thousand Worlds, and The Heart of the Battle. And if you want to go out further than that, you can. Again, check out our website, travelingthevortex.com, if you want to follow along.
That's right. While you're there, if you get any value out of this podcast, consider putting some value back into it. You can do that by clicking on the Patreon link there on the website. Also, consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to podcasts, specifically Apple Podcasts, because it boosts us in the ratings and recommendations. And then be sure to join us and our conversations on the Listeners Forum on Facebook. Anything else we need to do before we close this one? If not, until next week, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
David Warner rules!
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.